Welcome everyone to Melfuzz TV. I am Peter and today I'm going to be talking about Pluribus, Season 1, Episode 5. It's called Got Milk. So spoilers for the episode as always. So this one ends in a hell of a cliffhanger, which I feel like most people are probably going to assume the same thing about what Carol sees at the end of this episode. We're all thinking dead bodies, right? We're all thinking that they are making their nutrients out of the old dead bodies, not necessarily in a nefarious way, but more just in a, this is efficient, this is using the resources, the people that are already dead, millions of them because of everything that's happened in the last couple of weeks. We can turn them into food, and that's what they're drinking out of their milk cartons. So not actual milk, obviously, is what the episode gets into. So yeah, this is a... I think this is a good episode. It's maybe one of the weaker ones of the 5, just for one or two reasons. One is just an outrageously bad green screen shot early on in the episode when Carol goes up to the roof and sees that everyone's abandoning the town. Like, that looks terrible. I don't know what happened there, why that ended up looking so bad. I get that obviously there has to be some effects work here to show that everyone's leaving because you couldn't like manage that much traffic, but surely some of this could have been just her standing on a real roof. I don't know why this always has to be green screen. She's not jumping around or doing something dangerous. But yeah, it looked atrocious. I don't know what was going on with that. But it does lead into some conceptually interesting stuff, as you'd expect, is that after the end of last episode, where she effectively almost killed Zosha with a heart attack, she has been abandoned by the collective who have decided to leave. And you can kind of tell something's up right away because they're kind of giving her the cold shoulder every time she tries to talk to someone. And she goes for a nap and everyone just leaves. They all get on buses and trucks and they just get out of the city. And she realizes this and she's obviously like, what the hell? And there's a phone message. When she dials number 0, she gets a recording rather than a live person of basically saying, hey, we don't feel any different about you, but we need some space. You can leave a message and we'll get anything to you that you need. And notably, this voice was very familiar. That it took me a second. I was like, wait, I know this voice. Who's this voice? It's actually an actor who was on Better Call Saul. It's Howard from Saul. Patrick Fabian, I think it's the actor's name. But there was just a couple of lines in there where I'm like, wait, I know this guy's voice. Who is this? So a little cameo from the Vince Gilligan verse, if you will. But I think early on, when it set all this up, I think what I thought was going to be the point of this episode, and I think it largely is the point to some extent, is this idea that if she is truly left on her own, she's going to learn how, well, not just lonely that is, because it's obviously it would be lonely, but just how she needs other people to function, even if it is this collective, even if it is the mass of people. I think this is maybe, as someone who's a bit of an introvert myself, I think I can kind of relate to this idea of wanting to be alone, but realizing just how screwed you would be if you truly didn't have anyone to go to and, you know, structure or society or whatever. Obviously, it's an extreme case here because Carol gets weighted on hand and foot by the collective. She just asks for something and it happens. But I think the point of this episode is, again, to an extent, is to show her maybe realizing and like having these moments of like, oh, there's no help coming. I'm on my own here. And obviously, once we get to like the wolves or whatever later on, it's like, oh shit, she is truly on her own. And there's even some dark humor of like her trying to get the shotgun out of the car and it not working. So she ends up driving the car through her back fence to get rid of the wolves when they're trying to dig up Helen's grave. And then in the morning realizes, oh, there's a little button that unlocks the shotgun. Oh, and also the key to the handcuff that's still on my wrist and has been jangling like every time she's been doing anything in this episode up until this point, which is a good halfway or 2/3 into the episode. She's had this sound of the handcuff jangling like a bangle the entire time. And all of a sudden it's just like, oh, I could have figured this out. I could have done this. But I think what's interesting is that while I thought the episode was going to go down that particular path of her missing the others, and I think it does tease that at numerous points, I think when the phone rings after she leaves a message and she goes back to it, I think there's a little tinge of like, oh, thank God, someone's calling me, I'm not on my own. And it ends up just being another recorded message to give her instructions. But there's a little bit of like oh, the phone's ringing, right? I've got people back again. I think it's interesting though that Carol's strong personality doesn't just go down the path of, oh, I'm going to like feel lonely and sad and realize that I need others. Instead, it kind of makes her double down into her kind of like investigative like sort of story that she's got going here. This idea of trying to figure out who the collective are, what would turn them back, and so on. And then of course the investigation this episode really turns into is, wait, they're all drinking this milk, right? All of these dumpsters, all these bins around in public spaces have nothing in them but these empty milk cartons. What is up with that? And she goes diving into a dumpster and all the rest of it, and it leads her down this path of like sort of, trying to. I don't know if deflection is the right word. It's almost like rather than admitting that she is alone and needs the mass of people, right, and needs other people around and needs society, she kind of doubles down on the thing she wants to focus on, the thing that'll take her mind off of it. And that happens kind of right away, actually. As soon as they've left town, she records her first video, right? She sits down, she's like, hey, I'm going to be proactive about this. She puts on a bit of makeup, she gets herself presentable, and she sits down in front of the camera and says, hey, to the other 12 normies out there, they have revealed to me that they can be turned back into the way the world was. They didn't tell me how, but they cannot lie. And she makes a whole speech about it. And it's so interesting because it feels a little bit desperate, even though in a lot of ways we can relate to why she wants to uncover this. At this point, it does feel a little bit like, I don't know, like she's been abandoned by a partner and like she's in like a denial period of like, well, I'm more important than like mourning my loved one or whatever. Like, I mean, that's a weird comparison maybe, but it kind of feels like she's lashing out because she needs something to put her focus on. And this, like, trying to figure out a way against the aliens is, or I can say aliens, the collective, is something she can do and feel righteous about and feel like she's doing something productive and important. And the fact that they've abandoned me doesn't matter because what I'm doing matters more, right? I think that's kind of like the mind state she's kind of in. There's a little bit of denial in there, a little bit of whatever. So when she makes this video though, and we see that the only way that the collective are currently going to interact with her is via the use of drones, where she leaves a message and every time she calls this number 0, we hear the entire message again. We hear the entire spiel by Howard about how they need their space. And every single time she's getting a little bit more annoyed at having to listen to it. And I think that's also perfect because it's like a reminder every single time she has to phone that they have chosen to abandon her. They were willing to do anything to please her, and she was such a problem to deal with that they had to leave. No matter what she says, that has to make her feel something. That has to hurt a little bit. This idea, again, like you've got a loved one who wants to do anything for you, but you're such a pain to them in receiving this that they eventually want to run away instead and need, quote unquote, their space. So I like all that stuff, and the drone stuff is really funny, especially when she's her trash picked up. After she's had to like tidy up after the wolves the first time they showed up, and the drone, like, they warn her like, hey, that they can only be 17 kilograms or whatever, not pounds. It would have been pounds. It's America. But the drone lifts it up and it's clearly struggling. So we just kind of watch this slow attempt of the drone flying away, but it's kind of buckling and ends up sort of wrapping around the lamppost. And ends up just dangling there. And I was kind of waiting for it because it makes you wait an extra few seconds, but I'm like, that trash bag's going to burst. All of that trash that she cleaned up is going to all fall out. And sure enough, it did. Do you know what this reminded me more of anything else from Gilligan's other shows? It was probably the most pizza on the roof moment that we've had in this show. That's a famous moment from Breaking Bad, is throwing the pizza on the roof. This kind of felt like this show's version of that to some extent, and it was very funny. Like I was having a good time. I was laughing, And of course, there's the irony of Carol being like, she made her bed here. She put herself into this position. And again, we can understand exactly why she feels the way she does, and we're kind of rooting for her. Especially once again, she gets really proactive. Once she goes through the process of covering up the grave and making a little sort of a little monument for Helen. It's all very sweet, and there's a gorgeous like silhouette shot against the sunset as she's finishing up, and the cop car is still sitting there through the fence, and she's went to the hardware kind of place and gotten a lot of like stone slabs to cover the ground so that no one can get to it. But I also think this thematically ties into what I assume is dead bodies at the end of the episode. Again, we don't know for sure until next time. But this idea that the animals were trying to get to a dead body for food because they just see it as the natural thing to do. Like, why not use this body that's here? And she, of course, sees that as a desecration. She wants to protect Helen's memory and sees that as something that's not right. So I think that ties in thematically and maybe foreshadows what the reveal is at the end of what they're consuming. But yeah, and I did enjoy her investigation. I enjoyed all the pieces of it. I enjoyed her, going to the factory where this milk is all kind of put together, right? I say factory, I guess it would be more of a dairy farm, or I don't know, the processing plant, right? The place where they put it in all the cartons. And basically discovering that, okay, it's not actually what's in there, right? The taps are actually got this sort of like amber goo coming out of them. There's all these big bags of this crystallized looking stuff, and who knows what that is. And she's figured out that it's basically just water mixed with this stuff that's in the milk cartons. That's all it is. And she does another video where she's like done the pH testing. And I actually laughed out loud because I don't remember a lot of chemistry from school. But one of the few things I do remember is that when you do a pH test with pH paper, that 7 is neutral, right? And I can't remember which side of it is what, but if it's under, I think it's alkali. If it's over, it's acidic. Maybe it's the other way around. I can't remember. But I love that she went, it's a 7.1. And I had like a sort of moment, because she sort of says that and there's like a pause. And I thought, wait, isn't that just neutral? Because again, I wasn't too sure. It's been a long time. And then she sort of like checked to see what that means, and then she sort of put her head up and said, "That's about neutral." And I'm like, "Yeah, I thought that was the neutral one. That's just what water reads as, pretty much. Maybe not the 0.1, but the close enough." So I don't know. I got a little chuckle out of her like having to check that. As if she couldn't remember, because I assume she looked at this already before she was recording this video. And I think it's also important here that this video she makes, talking about all the milk stuff and explaining her research and showing the goo amber substance, I think it's very important that she kind of gets into these weird moments of hesitation and not knowing what to say, and then kind of try to fumble and find her words. And then she ends up deleting the recording and starting again. So she still makes the video, and presumably it's just a better version of the one we saw. But I think it's very interesting. There's very much a coping mechanism here to this, of like, she needs there to be something to solve here. She needs them to be a villain and for her to be right and all this. Maybe in the same way that if, someone breaks up with you, you need to like convince yourself they're the one who did something wrong, that they're the ones, the bad guys, kind of thing. Maybe there's a little bit of that going on here as well. But her catching herself and realizing that her argument's not that sound, and, deleting the recording, sitting back down and doing it again with a better take, I think is very interesting. And I love that we don't see the better take. We just see the shoddy one. We see the one where she kind of, it's almost like she's realizing that it doesn't sound that sinister, that, okay, this is maybe how they're consuming their sustenance and whatnot, and that's it. But it doesn't sound that bad as she's describing. It's like, okay, so they're not actually drinking milk, but this stuff doesn't seem necessarily sinister on its own. But yeah, and then she's looking at the bag of the crystal stuff later on after she's done all the grave stuff, and she ends up she goes back to the sprouts because of the barcode that's on it, and then it doesn't really give her anything, but then she goes looking for anything that's in the same type of bag, and it seems to be this brand of dog food. Is whatever factory puts this dog food together is also where they're putting this stuff together, because it's in the same type of bag with the barcode in the same place. So she finds this place, which is also close by. Maybe you could argue it's a little bit of a coincidence that both the dairy farm and this factory are both within, relative driving distance of where she lives. I mean, I it makes sense that every city would maybe have their own batch of this stuff being processed. But I mean, the bags themselves could have came from wherever. I mean, it's a minor quibble, but it's just something that did pop out of my head. But that's what the episode builds up to its ending, is her sneaking about in this place looking for, what's here, and she finds, like, just there's a bunch of just regular food kind of like stocked up in shelves and stuff. But the episode ends with her lifting up this tarp, and she stares for a good minute before she gasps in horror, and it cuts to the credits at the end. It's a good ending. It's a good moment. Obviously, we want to know what it is. But I do think the cut to black is very effective on the gasp. I think Rhea Seehorn sells it very well, so I was into that. I think it is fascinating to see her be abandoned for the whole episode and maybe deal with the idea of, like, what is life going to be like if no one's around, kind of thing. Also the idea that, she demands that the lights be put back on, everywhere in the city because of the wolves coming, and she thinks that might stop it, whatever. But I think this idea of her clinging to what the world was, it's a really interesting thing to watch, I think, for us, the audience, because we inherently can, like, side with her because, yeah, we're in this world the way she remembers it, and we probably think it's the better option. So we're naturally kind of rooting for her because she's also the main character. But I think the show has done a really good job of presenting Carol as a little bit more layered, where I feel like she's constantly feeling like she's maybe coping. Like, everything she's doing, it feels like she's someone who's in denial, trying to cope with the new status quo. And it almost borderline just kind of feels unhealthy at a point. Even though on paper, I would totally buy why she wants to investigate this stuff, why she wants to see how they're consuming, and how we can maybe turn them back. These are all things that on paper make sense that we would also want her to find out. But the way the show is presenting her and the way the character's been performed by Rhea Seehorn is very much showing someone who is becoming obsessed, who is refusing to accept the reality she's in, and it feels like an unhealthy person again after some kind of breakup. It's particularly in this episode, because this episode they do literally break up with her and leave her on her own in her own city. Again, sometimes fiction is just a nice way of amplifying whatever the literal version is. So this idea of her feeling alone is amplified in a very literal sense by them leaving the entire city to her, where she's the only living person in an entire city, right? Because normally you can't do that, but here it just amplifies all the normal things you would feel when someone is left by someone else, or abandoned, or broken up with. So really dig all that. Again, like, the big thing really is just the is that green screen shot early on. And I think the other reason why I might say this is the weakest one overall, although I still think it's very strong, and I still thought there was a lot of great stuff throughout it, and I'm liking what they're doing with Carol as a character, is maybe just when it did cut to the ending, even though I think the moment itself is handled very well, I did have a little tinge of, oh, that's all. Oh, I'm already done. Like, it felt like maybe it was just a little bit short of a full meal this week. And typically, Gilligan's very good, as a showrunner, of not letting that happen. I always feel like I got a full course. Also, I want to point out that there's a scene early on where, and forgive me if I'm mispronouncing this, Laxmi, who is the woman, the mother of the normies who are left, calls her at the hospital to complain because when Carol made everyone cry as Zosha was having a heart attack and the entire collective was crying, it also meant that her child was crying because he's part of the collective. So she calls Carol to give her what for, and is very, very upset about all this. So, and obviously Carol's assuming and hoping that the collective are distributing this video that she's made, or both videos that she's made, to the others who are there. And I wonder if the guy from the start of last episode, I wonder if this is where he's going to play into things again, is he's going to see her videos and maybe be the only one who either watches them, or certainly the only one who maybe gives a crap and takes them seriously and says, oh, she's onto something, I want to try and help with this. But it's interesting, though, because Carol had to ask for them to subtitle it word for word. And it's like, yeah, again, a lot of trust has to be placed in this entity, this group of people, to keep their word here and do that, because it would be so easy for them to misinterpret something or just subtitle it wrong and have anyone who doesn't speak English just not understand what she's saying. And even when she, even for the people who do speak English, it's not like she's talking about super common things when she starts talking about milk production and pH paper and all sorts. But yeah. So yeah, I think the number one theory for the ending is it's dead bodies that are being repurposed into sustenance, but not in a super sinister way, just more in a this is a super efficient thing to do. And I think that's how they'll sell it if, I assume, Carol confronts them about it. And again, that's very much assuming what it is. And it's hard to imagine what else would incur that reaction from Carol. I don't really know what else could do it. I don't know. I mean, she takes a second to react, but I mean, I buy it taking a second to process what she's looking at. Like, I get it. That would make sense to me. But hey, anyway, that's my thoughts on the episode. I did miss Carol interacting with people a bit more in this one, but the premise of the episode is the reason for that. She needed to be on her own for all this stuff, and I especially like her realizing that she could have had the shotgun when she wanted it if she just used her brain, that she could have had this handcuff off the entire time. So her sighing and saying "son of a bitch" as she's making these realizations, I think is a really good moments of her, her like ignoring something and like getting obsessed with the difficult solution when she could have, done the right thing in the first place. Anyway, that's my thoughts on episode 5 of Pluribus, which was a day or two early this week because of Thanksgiving, I believe. Although I had Stranger Things to do, so this is Friday anyway by the time I'm getting to it. But thank you very much for joining me. You can, of course, let me know what you thought of the episode down in the comments. Like, subscribe, all that stuff. Helps out a bunch if you do. And, of course, you can support all the content over at patreon.com/MailFuzzTV or via YouTube membership, and it really does help keep everything coming. So thank you very much for joining me. I'll see you guys next time. Keep watching TV. Have you got any vanilla?